Hello comrades, the Honey Badger here with yet another guide. This time it will be dedicated to the orphanages. Yes, I know it's not orphanage, it's orphanages, but excuse me if I'll do some mistakes. Anyway, is it weird that last week my daughter got born and this week we're discussing about orphanages? Or is it just me? Well, rest assured that I have no plans on giving her up, but you know whom have these plans? Your citizens. Yes, you kinda heard me right. Well, let's see the topics. How an orphanage works, how to properly set up the orphanage for best results, orphanage examples, starting with a stagnating small city with and without orphanages, then going for a growing small city with or without orphanages, then a stagnating big city and a growing big city with and without orphanages. Also, as a last topic, when should you start thinking about building an orphanage? Let's start off with the first topic. An orphanage is basically a place where irresponsible citizens will abandon their children. The list of reasons is as follows. Parent death. Yes, don't chuckle at me. It's not my fault Babushka is 70 years old and has a child before her death at 71 years old. Parent escaping your republic, North Korea vibes for the win, and parent goes to jail. In this last scenario, the child will be returned back to the parent once their prison time is done. Moreover, stop thinking about orphanages as something linked to criminality. There's no such thing. Orphanages are totally separate from criminality. As a matter of fact, you can have criminality and education turned off completely and still have access to orphanages with absolutely no problems. Now with that out of the way, let's move on how to properly set up an orphanage for best results. Well, most guides simply tell you to crank up the Soviet propaganda to 100% and be done with it. However, well, that's kind of false, and it should not be the case, especially at the beginning. Let's see the population statistics for now. My loyalty at the moment is 46%. It is quite high at the moment, but the people that are working in my orphanage does not impact positively the kids' loyalty. Therefore, best if you ignore loyalty at the beginning and focus on it later down the line. For the beginning, try to focus on happiness, on lower criminality, on how sports are affected, and if you can, anti-religious propaganda, but kinda iffy over there. Usually I try to focus on having enthusiasm for sports a little bit higher because this will grow healthy children. Also, don't forget about the minimal government loyalty for your employees. The higher this is, the better the stats over here. Moreover, make sure you do not turn down the maximum amount of tutors. The lower amount of tutors you have, the worse these stats over here are. Moreover, if the orphanage gets overpopulated by children, this usually happens because of the shift ends. Basically, you will never have 40 workers at a time over here without some delay. It will always be a little bit weird, but basically the higher the people over here, the better the statistics over here will be, and the children will have space to grow without resulting upbringing being down. So basically over here the stats will always fluctuate. As long as government loyalty is above -1%, it should be perfectly fine. Focus on happiness, on sports, and on criminality instead. Moving on, the amount of orphanages you are going to need in your republic highly depends on the loyalty of your citizens. For example, when I played on a custom map with the following settings, basically the unsatisfied citizen reaction set to great/hard, I noticed that I was using one single orphanage for each 10,000 citizens. But at the same time, I had the radio tower and the TV station boosting my republic's loyalty to 70%. So somewhere around one orphanage for every 7.5 to 10,000 citizens will be perfectly fine. Also, while we are in the terms of loyalty, let's build a residential over here and let's see something interesting. Now, if I invite a citizen from the third world over here, I'm going to notice that their loyalty will be extremely low. Let's see. Let's wait for the secret police to arrive so they can show me the loyalty of these people. There we go. So we can see loyalty 11%, 33, 36, 16, 23. Based on my tests, basically the loyalty ranges always between 10% and 30% for Western citizens. When you are inviting immigrants from the Soviet bloc, you're going to notice that their loyalty is somewhere between 40 to 60%. We got kinda lucky over here and everyone is about, there we go, 49% one. And if you're gonna invite experts, their loyalty is yet again between 40 and 60%. Now, in the orphanage, the children that you are going to raise over here usually inherit the loyalty of their original parents. So if we're looking here, all of them have between 30 and 48%. Actually, here's one that has only 27%. So it can go lower with absolutely no problems, but still, it beats inviting third world country citizens and paying for them, and it also beats inviting Soviet citizens since they cost a lot of money. Maintaining the children until they grow up to be adults at 21 years, it's cheaper than directly buying citizens. Also, you got the education. When you are inviting third world country people, their education level is no education. It will be between 0.18 and 0.95. Basically almost ready to work, but not quite. They will need to go to a school in order to learn Russian and work in your republic. When you're inviting normal workers, they are with the basic education. And when you're inviting highly educated workers, of course, they are above 2.0, namely university education. Now, when it comes to orphanages, the education of the abandoned children can range from no education to basic education to university education. Let's see, this little guy over here, which has 8 years, has no education. Already, this 8-year-old child is more educated at 0.60 than the foreign third world country worker that is at 0.58 over here, or 0.18. This guy, he's 27 years old and he's at 0.18. However, the 8-year-old guy is at 0.60. Now, for basic education, yes, the higher the child's age, the higher his education is. And if you got a university laying around, the children that are above age 18 will go to the university to study, and you're gonna wake up with children having university education ready to work when they reach 21 years old. And as for the reason I'm making this video, on Reddit, everyone ignores this population booster because their city is stagnating. Moreover, the current YouTube videos that are covering orphanages show it in a very bad light, and they are 3 years old. Since then, Peter, the developer, fixed the orphanages to be better. The problem I'm having with the current guides is that they mention orphanages will overpopulate your city and causing stress on the infrastructure. That cannot be more wrong. You are the one dictating the city size. You are the one deciding when the city grows, because you are the one building the residential housing. Watch my infrastructure guides for water and electricity to get a feel when it's safe to place down yet another residential building. Also, when it comes to your republic stagnating, let's be serious. Accidents happen, especially in hard mode. The population can fluctuate based on the events that occur. You don't know how an unmaintained truck fails to deliver food to your shop, or how a freeze wave in Siberia will leave you with a ton of deaths, or if your elderly population dies in waves, or your heating plant decides to go on a fritz and stop working, or how your main power line decides to go up in flames, burns to the ground, and then you have a full month of no electricity in realistic mode. These accidents happen. They are unavoidable sometimes, especially the earthquakes. You need a reliable way to bring up your population back to normal. Therefore, I have prepared some scenarios for you to see that it really makes it obvious that you need an orphanage in your republic. Let's start off with the configuration. Everything got built and tested with the following settings. Unsatisfied citizens' reaction will be grayed hard. Everything else will be disabled because we only want to focus on orpherinages. Again, you are the one deciding when the infrastructure does not support your city anymore and it needs to be expanded. There's absolutely no reason for me in this video to explain how water and electricity works when I already got some guides on them. Also, we have education and crime enabled. The rest are completely disabled, including fires and global events, since those do not affect orphanages at all. Moreover, during the tests, I will have a lot of oil refineries around here in order to have the population not unemployed. Remember, unemployed workers, if you have a lot of them, they might get sad and dissatisfied, and their loyalty and happiness will drop. Therefore, I want to keep my unemployed workers as low as possible. Also, apart from this, the deliveries are automatically bought directly in the pub or in the small store or in the grocery store. And all tests will be ran for 1 full year with no headroom for the ramping of the orphanage. You're gonna notice why I mentioned this later down the line. For the small city/republic, the population I'm starting with is 3,000. You're gonna see now the statistics. I have 1.5 thousand citizens that are workers. The rest are children or people without their own flat. Starting off, this is the scenario after 1 year of stagnating city. Basically, I haven't built any more residentials around here, and we can see the worker population is identical as we started last year. 1.5 thousand workers. Apart from this, the children are way lower than in the previous scenario. In this case, you're gonna have a very hard time replacing your elderly population. Now let's see what happened to the population, and I'm gonna explain this only in this scenario and the next scenario. The rest I will assume that you understood it. Basically, you're gonna see that my population slowly rises, and then at the tipping point it starts decreasing. Again, I do not have any orphanage over here. This over here is actually happening because I have 21 plus adult workers without their own flat. These adult workers decide to leave the Republic. It's perfectly fine, and This is my beef with the previous YouTube guys that I've watched on orphanages. They also show the downing of the actual population, but they do not explain that this is false. Let's check the demographic structure by itself. If we are looking at the productive age workers, we're gonna see that this fluctuates always between 1,573 to 1,580. So it's not a big difference, it's just 7 citizens over here that are either leaving the Republic or entering the Republic. Basically, from all the residential buildings, 7 apartments were not being occupied. Then we got happiness. Happiness went up in the middle and then went down. This is expected because the happiness is calculated based on also the workers that do not own their own apartment. It's perfectly fine. It went down by 1%. Then, in terms of government loyalty, it's always going down. Remember, at the beginning, I did mention that inviting Soviet citizens usually have their loyalty ranging between 40 and 60%. Usually around 60%, it goes to the higher range. And we can see over here, we do not have any radio tower or TV station. And because we are in hard mode, the only possible way to raise loyalty at the beginning is with monuments. And these monuments only raise it to 30%. It's expected for my loyalty to go down. Currently, it's at 46%. Then we have the average worker age. We can see that the average worker age always went up. It never went down. Also, in terms of education, we can see over here the stats of both the adults that do not own a flat and the other people. We can see we have 275, most likely children that are uneducated. Then we have educated people that grew and stagnated around 1,800. And then we got university education that went up to a point and then goes down. Good. So this is our baseline currently. Let's check what happens when we introduce an orphanage for this stagnating city. And now let's see the same exact scenario, but this time we got an orphanage. We can see that the government loyalty, I've set it above 20%. Already, even at the beginning, without any radio tower or stuff like that, I've tried to play around with the settings. So criminality will be in green, happiness will be in green, and sports will be in green, completely ignoring government loyalty. As we can see, it's 2.40 at the moment, which is a very low number. Now let's see the population. We can see the same identical number, 1,570. Remember, this is a stagnating city with an orphanage in it. Now let's see the population statistics. Same years, from 1st January 1981 to 4th January 1982. We can see the same exact population growth and then going down. Moreover, at going down, we can see a actual better number at the end. Beforehand, the number of people were at 2.9 thousand. Now at the end, it's 3,000. We already have 100 extra workers ready for us to take over if something catastrophic happens and our citizens decide to leave the Republic. Now let's go at productive age workers. Again, we see between 1,572 to 1,579. It seems like one extra worker was available when the orphanage was not around. And this is, I basically blame through randomness over here. We are not 100% sure what happened here, but it's awfully similar. The same exact 7 apartments were not filled. Then we go to happiness. Happiness, we see that it rose again, and then it dropped down. It dropped down by 1%. This is kind of negligible. When it comes to government loyalty, we can also see that it dropped down by 0.5%. Before it was 46.17, now it's 45.41. Then we have the average age of the worker. Before we saw that it was 35.78, now it's 35.31. It's a bit lower, but it's still on the rising side. Again, because this is a stagnating city, most of the orphans growing over here will get frustrated that they do not have a place to live and simply leave the Republic altogether. And in terms of education, the same exact number, 273, well, it was 275 before. For educated workers, we can already see a huge spike up. Before, the education was 1.7k, now it's 1.9k. They are already more educated. And the university educated ones still went lower. Before it was 896, now it's 818. Again, I kind of blame it on lowering the amount of citizens because they are frustrated and leaving the Republic. The important part is that your basic workers, the ones that you always need a lot of them, are higher when you have an orphanage around. As we can see, also the adults living with parents, they are slightly higher, if I'm not mistaken. I'm gonna place it on the screen right now. So what does this tell us? Basically, having an orphanage in your city is way better than not having it. Basically, the basic education workers are higher when you're having an orphanage than when you don't. Moreover, the average age will continue to decrease. We're gonna see in the next examples that it reaches very low ends. Let's see what happens to a city with a breathing room. Basically, we're gonna start building a lot of residential buildings and see how it grows. Now, let's start with the baseline. I want to evidentiate something over here. Basically, the start date, I've set it 25 December on purpose. As you can see, when we are looking at the actual population, everything grows linearly. It's not a bad thing. However, when we go with productive age workers, you're gonna see a major spike at the beginning. This spike basically represents the adults still living with parents that we've had at the beginning of adding new residential buildings. For our test to see how orphanages impact the game, we do not need this spike. So what I'm going to do is increase the day until that spike vanishes. As you can see, the spike vanishes on 5th January. So we're going to take 5th January up until 4th of January. So let's see, we saw that the actual population grew linearly. In case of the productive age workers, we can see a slow start at the beginning until April, and afterwards a huge jump. This jump over here, it's not linear because the babies that we were having at that certain point in time grew and became adults. That's why over here it's a spiky behavior. Good. Apart from the productive workers, let's check happiness over here. Happiness fluctuated, but it did not impact that much. It's still 91%. One more mention over here, it's 91% in my case because I am using flats with quality at 93%. You're gonna notice in the future comparisons when we're gonna go to large cities with high population that the happiness will drop. It is expected because I'm going to use flats with poorer quality. We have happiness, then government loyalty. It was still going down because I still don't have any TV station or radio station. It's expected, but it reached 45.65 as we can see. Average productive age is now 32 years old, and again it's always rising, it's never going down. On education, on no education workers it went down and then goes back up. And basic education, again it went up and then went down a bit. And university education, it's linear because I do have a technical university over here. Now let's check how an orphanage will change these statistics. Now in this scenario, I do have two orphanages. It wasn't necessary to have two orphanages, but I did place them over here because I was clueless how many we needed. Just one of them should have been enough, but I went with two out of safety reasons. But in regards to actual population, we can see the same exact growth that we saw before, but this time instead of having 3,857 actual population, we have 3,959. That's 100 people extra just by having the orphanages over here. In terms of happiness, we can see that it's still somewhere around 91%, just as it was when we did not have any orphanages. In regards to government loyalty, it went down to 45.83, as I can see, 45.76. It's a little bit lower than when we had started, but then again, remember that orphanages will affect government loyalty at the beginning until you reach around 50 to 60% loyalty. Then we have the average age. The average age, again, it went to 31.93. Beforehand, it was 32.15. Already we can see a younger population. A younger population means that their loyalty stagnates more, which means more productive workers. Then let's check out the demographic structure, which is the most important one. Again, starting from 5th January, to ignore the adults still living with parents, we started with 1,724 and ended with 2,691. Beforehand, we were having 2,641 workers. Beforehand, we increased the population by 918 workers. But in this scenario, we increased the population to 1,056 workers in total. That means 138 extra workers. That is a 15% increase by just having the orphanage running rather than not having any orphanage at all. In terms of education, we can see that for no education, we have 20 less uneducated workers. For basic education, your day-to-day workers, this increased from 1.5k to 1.9k. Then for university education, this one decreased from 1.7k to 1.4k. Most likely this is because they did not have enough workers to handle in the technical universities that I have over here. And now you might be wondering, it seems like orphanages are not that worth it. Based on what you've seen, is just a mere 15% increase. However, you are not taking into consideration the fact that this is a very small city. Let's also compare it to a big city. Here's a bigger city with almost 19,000 citizens, of which 13,000 are workers. Yes, I went overboard with higher education because I did implement a new technical university together with 2 halls of residences just to bring up the university education a bit higher. I did bring it up a bit higher because the industries over here were getting overfilled and I needed an airplane production line to make sure that educated workers go to it. Apart from this, things that changed from the previous scenario is that now I do have a television and a radio station, actually 2 of them, one early start DLC and one normal ones. And also the quality of flats dropped from 93% to 87%. This is done on purpose to mimic somehow the normal cities you would have in your own republic. So happiness did drop from 91% to 85%. Let's just quickly go through the population statistics so we don't repeat ourselves too much. In regards for actual population, here's the statistics. It grew and kind of fluctuated at a state. Remember, this is a stagnating city. Similarly, this is for the actual demographic structure of number of workers. It seems like it's 40 apartments difference over here. Before it was 7 because we had lower number of population. In terms of loyalty, loyalty grew to almost 70%. In terms of happiness kind of stagnated somewhere around 84%. And average age is 37. It went down because before I started this test, I actually used the 2 orphanages. And as you can see, there's 10 years difference between our previous test and this test. I've done it on purpose to make sure that I kind of try to eliminate as much as possible the orphanage impact on the Republic. Uneducated workers over here. Basic education, and university education. Just as a fun fact, if you watched my criminality guide, you're gonna see that this city is set up with that guide in mind. Basically, the police, I have a single police station in the entire Republic over here. I have a single prison in the entire Republic, and I have a single courthouse set up just as I've mentioned in the criminality guide with very low sentences. Basically, this keeps my prison under control and government loyalty and criminality is lowered each single time a prisoner gets in, and I don't need more than one single police station to almost 20,000 population. So if you know how to play with criminality, it will be extremely easy to handle your republic. Let's also show you really fast how criminality is on all of the buildings. As you can see, it's 1% everywhere, with some spots here and there where we have 2% criminality. Over here it looks a bit more because these people just came into the Republic. Now, as you can see, we have the orphanages, both of them working at high capacity. They are almost filled to the brim. The government loyalty is still in the negatives. This is kind of expected because it's kind of crowded in here. And if I'm not mistaken, no, we don't have. We only have prison upbringing. Until now, we did have also the child upbringing as a happiness modifier, because you can't fill in all 40 slots at the same time. However, when they are filled, even for a split second, the children will come in and simply overfill your orphanage. It's not that big of a deal. And as you can see, let's compare the population. Again, the total population just grew normally. This time we have way more than the last time. By way more, I mean 500 extra citizens. Then on happiness, it just fluctuated and it seems like it dropped slightly. I'm not 100% sure. It will be shown on the screen. Then for loyalty, it is extremely similar. No problems over here. Average productive age, this time it is a bit lower. Remember, lower average age means better citizens because they can keep their high loyalty for longer until they die. Then for no education workers, including babies and children, it grew by 100. For normal educated workers, it grew by 300 almost. And for university education, it grew by 100. So already we have better stats just by having 2 full orphanages in our republic. And this is a stagnating republic. Oh boy, let's see the actual growing of the republic. Those over there, you're gonna see the impact. Here's the same exact republic. This time it grew to 19,500 workers. Both orphanages are turned off, and of course we are 10 years in the future. This is because I did use the orphanages to quickly grow the city. Now, if we're gonna look at actual population, we see a straight line, not a big deal. Then at productive workers, we're gonna see the same thing because we were having adults still living with parents. When I started building the residential homes, it jumped by 1,000 almost. So we can see 13,000 to 14,000. Therefore, I'm gonna move the date so we only cover the growth itself. Here we go. We can see growing in spikes. This is because children were becoming adults and it's more visible over here. Also, the actual population grew by 342 workers in just 1 year. Those are rookie numbers for 19,000 citizens. Then we have happiness. Happiness over that time, it slightly decreased, but still it's between 1% difference. It's not a big deal. Loyalty, it grew from 68-ish% to 69.22. The average worker age, it went down from 38, which was beforehand on a stagnating city, to 36, so it went down by 2 years. Then no education, basic education, and university education. Now let's compare it with the orphanage. And here's the same scenario, but this time with orphanages. We're gonna see actual population right now, it's over 20,000. So we already added 500 extra workers just by having the orphanage. Then happiness, it also fluctuated, the same in the 1% range, no big deal over here. Then for demographic structure, the same spike at the beginning, so let's move it a bit further. There we go, around here. You're going to notice something interesting. At the beginning, the population was slowly growing, just like the previous graph. However, starting from May, it skyrocketed. This skyrocketing behavior happened because finally the children from our orphanage were old enough to become adult workers. Remember that at the beginning, when I stated the setup, I said I did not leave any headroom for the orphanage to work, because that would have meant way more time spent on testing. If you would have built this orphanage and have it up and running, for example, in the last 2 years or in the last 5 years, you would only see this spike. Do you remember that in the small population we had 15% increase? Well, this time we grew by 587 citizens. That means a 71% increase. So that 15% is now 71, just with 2 orphanages. Moreover, let's go a bit to the average worker age. It went down a bit more to 36.23. It doesn't make that much of a difference. But let's move instead 10 years in the past and see how that affects stuff. We're gonna see that when it comes to the average age, when I was actually growing the population, so let's see the actual population over here where it started growing somewhere around 1982 and it grew until 1986. If we're gonna compare it the average age, we can see that it went down to wrong one. Over here, there we go. It started off at 23, it went down to 30. This is during my original test with low population, and then it slowly went down up to 28 years. So you can expect an average working age of 28 years old. What does this mean for your republic? Well, each individual citizen takes some time to have its loyalty go up. Basically, this is influenced by the percentage we see in the radio station, in the TV station, etc. By having them live just a little bit longer, or actually, to put it logically, by having them start increasing their loyalty just a little bit faster from the beginning of their life, this means that their productivity will go up and it will remain up for more time, since they're gonna die later in their life. And we can see this finally, it's visible at government loyalty. If we're gonna go back to check it by year, let's do last year, there we go, this year, sorry, we can see the loyalty growing and it went above than what we had before the orphanages. This is because the orphanages by themselves right now at this specific moment, because I have higher loyalty, finally the government loyalty is in the positives and it will remain in the positives for long periods of times. So that means that my loyalty will grow and most likely exceed the threshold. Apart from this, let's see, educated workers, basic education, and then university education. We can see on all scenarios that everything grew well above. So, as a recap, what did we learn? There's no harm in using orphanages if you know how to tinker with the intended upbringing. The orphanage actually positively impacts your republic and allows you to grow your population faster than you're actually needing. And also, you're getting better citizens from your stagnating cities. It works both early game and late game, as long as you make your intended upbringing focus on lowering criminality and increasing happiness and sports. And that's kind of all I had to present. YouTube also have orphan videos. Did you know that only 11.6% of videos on YouTube reach 1000 views? Well, the rest are orphan videos, trapped in the depths of YouTube's content. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so, like the video and leave a comment down below. This will help the video escape the orphan area. And hey, if you go outside and touch the grass, then also share it with your friends too. Until next time, I'm the Honey Badger and I'm out.